A Security Council resolution imposes an arms embargo on Houthis in Yemen. But could that change things on the ground as the Saudi-led air campaign continues? And what's behind Iran's peace plan for this war-torn country? This is Inside Story. Hello there, welcome to the programme. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Now, it's been almost 3 weeks since a Saudi-led coalition began airstrikes on Yemen. The campaign has so far had limited success in pushing back Houthi fighters, and there's growing concern about the number of civilians killed by both sides. Now the UN has passed a resolution imposing an arms embargo on Yemen's Shiite Houthi rebels. The Gulf countries that joined forces in the air campaign took the lead in drafting the resolution. It was passed with 14 votes and 1 abstention. Russia. It said it wanted a ceasefire and an arms embargo which applied to all sides, not just the Houthis. So let's take a look at what's been agreed. As we've mentioned, the resolution will stop the sale of weapons to Houthi fighters. It calls on the Houthis to withdraw from areas they've seized, including the capital Sana'a. It also imposes an asset freeze and travel ban on a number of people, including Houthi leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi and the son of the former president Ali Abdullah Saleh. And it empowers UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon to negotiate the delivery of humanitarian aid to Yemen. Several things to discuss here. For more, I'm joined by our guests from Jeddah, Khaled Batafi, the senior columnist at the Saudi Gazette. From Tehran, Mohammed Marandi, professor at the University of Tehran. And from Washington, D.C., Dana Stuster, policy analyst at the National Security Network. Dana writes extensively on the Middle East for Foreign Policy magazine. Gentlemen, good to have you on the show. Dana, let's start with you. What do you think the reaction to the UN resolution is going to be? Because the Houthis say that it supports aggression. It's calling for rallies in protest.
That's right. They oppose this completely because this cuts off a source of aid. Although the issue, this might not actually have a severe effect on them in terms of supplies of arms, because Yemen has tons of arms floating around already. What this is, though, is an international endorsement of the Saudi intervention that the Saudis have pushed through the Security Council very hard.
So you think it's not going to have much effect regarding the flow of weapons to Houthis, but rather it's a symbolic endorsement of the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen?
Yes, I think that's correct.
OK. Mohammed, one of the questions is, of course, about how the Houthis are getting their weapons. Iran denies giving military support to the Houthis. That's something, of course, that the US and the Saudis don't believe.
Well, the United States and the Saudis are not really in a position to complain. They're the ones who are carrying out airstrikes on civilian targets and bridges and schools. The United States, of course, playing a support role, and hospitals, and many innocent people have been killed, and they failed. It's the Saudi war on Yemen has failed, and it's extraordinary how they made this huge blunder. The Israeli regime, which is much stronger than the Saudis, waged a similar campaign in Gaza on multiple occasions and failed. And the Saudis are now doing the same, though much weaker, to a much more powerful population, a much larger population in a much larger country.
We are going to talk about what the Saudis are hoping to achieve here, but I just want to concentrate on this one issue, this UN resolution trying to prevent arms flowing into Yemen, into the hands of the Houthis. Do you think this resolution is going to have any effect on the ground in that way?
No, not at all. And the battle is not between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis. It's the popular committees, the army on one side, which is comprised of Ansarullah, the Houthis, and many people in southern Yemen. The people in southern Yemen have many grievances against Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis, by carrying out these attacks, they basically united the country. And ironically, in this Security Council declaration, resolution, nothing has been said about Al-Qaeda, and it's very interesting that the Saudis and Al-Qaeda are both fighting on the same side of the battlefield.
Okay. Khaled, a couple of points to put to you there. First of all, that the UN resolution is not going to have any effect in controlling the flow of weapons into Yemen.
First, I would like to say that Iran is in no position to talk about civilian casualties after the 250,000 casualty in Syria and hundreds of thousands casualties in Iraq, and the last were in Tikrit by the Shia militia led by Iran. So they should be ashamed of themselves talking about any casualties, civilian casualty anywhere else. Now,
but all right. Well, since you've started with that point, let me just put Mohammed's second point to you, that the Saudi airstrikes are having no effect in Yemen other than causing civilian casualties.
Why would Saudi Arabia cause civilian casualties? Why would they
airstrikes do cause casualties. That's the point of airstrikes.
Yes. The airstrikes, when they pinpoint the military's camps and military movement and the communication centers, and all that is shown to you by videos. And if there were any casualties, it's more on the Houthis side. They are killing people all the time. And by the way, the war started a year ago, and the casualties by the people they killed and the places they destructed, there were much more than the last few weeks. And they are doing that the same in Aden and Dali and elsewhere. They are killing people by tanks.
Are the airstrikes actually achieving what Saudi wants them to achieve?
Airstrike doesn't achieve what you want to achieve in few weeks. I mean, let us remember when the airstrike started in northern Iraq and Syria, and including the airstrike the Iranian joined in. It took time, but before any thought of intervening land armies, they have to soften the ground and to make it easier for Yemeni tribes and other part of the countries to be at the same level. The playing field should be the same, so they could take what they were stolen from them by themselves. But if they needed some help, maybe the help is coming. All options are on the table.
Okay. Mohammed, I know you want to reply to that, but I just want to ask Dana. There's obviously comparisons with the US-led airstrikes against ISIL here. When Saudi Arabia led this coalition into Yemen, what was its end game? What is it hoping it will finally achieve with these airstrikes?
It's really unclear, and that is something that, the Security Council resolution provides a bit of clarity on that, but the Saudi endgame seems to be reinstating President Abdurrabbu Mansur Hadi in Sana'a again, and he's now fled the country. He's in Riyadh, and it's unclear that he has the popular legitimacy to actually be president of Yemen again. Most people, at least the political analysts in the United States, think that this has to end with some sort of political dialogue that would appoint some sort of new leadership in Yemen that will have the legitimacy and buy-in from the various parties. But that seems very far off at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting that the resolution also demanded that the Houthis stop fighting and withdraw from areas that they'd seized, including Sana'a. Well, they didn't do that after the UN brokered agreement back in January, so it seems unlikely that they're going to do it now, particularly if the Saudi airstrikes continue.
That's right.
Mohammed, what do you make of what Khaled was saying, that any military operation takes time and that this is a way to allow Yemeni militia on the ground to take on the Houthis?
I think everyone except for the Saudis have recognized that they failed. The Pakistanis have steered clear of this. And the Saudis are basically bombing people and uniting the country. And what happened in Syria is exactly reinforces the point I make. It's the U.S. Vice President who just a few months ago in a speech at Harvard University admitted that American allies, the Saudis among others, helped create ISIL. And right now the Nusra Front, which is Al-Qaeda in Syria, they are being supported both in the north by Turkey and in the south by the Saudis through the Jordanian border. It's no secret. So basically what is happening in Yemen is the same thing. The Saudis have kept Yemen back for decades. The people of Yemen are not happy with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis have enormous oil wealth, and the Yemenis are among the poorest people in the world. And now they want to be able to stand on their own feet.
This didn't start as discontent over the Saudis. This started as internal domestic rival factions, didn't it? This started as a domestic problem, which because of its nature has spread to the region. But it didn't start because people in Yemen were hacked off with the Saudis. It started because, you know, it's a poverty-stricken country. It had political problems.
No, in fact, it did. I mean, Mansour Hadi was never elected to power. He was the only candidate, and he was installed by the Saudis and the Americans. He was supposed to be a transitional president, the only candidate, and he was supposed to be there for 2 years. He stayed on for more than 2 years. He resigned. When Ansar Allah, the popular committees and others went into the capital, there was no violence because no one supported the so-called president. But the people of Yemen know that their problem is that they don't have independence. Yemen is a country with thousands of years of civilization, and they have every right to have their own government. But the Saudis simply can't give up. The Saudis have misplaced, or they have a misguided policy across the board.
All right, well, let me put that to Khaled.
They helped create a civil war in Syria, and Iraq, of course, they supported the American invasion of Iraq.
So
Iran didn't
Khaled,
support the American
serious
invasion.
accusations about Saudi foreign policy there, not least with Yemen. What do you say to what Mohammed's been saying?
Well, too many, but I'll try to be brief. First, Al-Qaeda and ICS. I would ask him why Al-Qaeda and ISIS never ever attacked Iran. Why the sons and the leaders of Al-Qaeda
I think that's widening this out just a little bit too much. Can we just focus on Saudi policy and Mohammed's accusation that it's Saudi policy that's destabilizing Yemen?
Please let him continue. I think it's good for your viewers to listen to what he has to say.
Yes, he started
right.
with saying that
ISIL and Iran, please.
Created Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And I would ask also why 1,500
I said that the U.S. Vice President
were please don't. I didn't interrupt you. Why 1,500 Daeshi and Qaeda who were imprisoned in Abu Ghraib were just one night with the order of Nour al-Maliki, your agent in there, were let out without any court or any, and then were let in, and the others were let from prisons in Damascus. Why this happened?
Okay, can I just bring back the discussion? I'm sorry.
So,
let me bring Dana. I want to ask you. It's very clear listening to both our guests. It's very clear.
I need to say about.
But it's very
Iraq
clear listening to both our guests. Yes, no. And this is what I want to talk about. That what we've got is a proxy battleground between the competing ideologies of Saudi Arabia and Iran, and that we've seen this at several stages in several conflicts. Is it the case that there can never really be stability in the region without agreement from both Saudi Arabia and Iran?
I mean, I don't know that you're going to get agreement, but there has to be some measure of coming together. I mean, the only chance for Yemen, I mean, Iran proposed a peace plan, but that has no credibility coming from Iran. And Riyadh called for peace negotiations in Riyadh in the UN Security Council resolution. And neither of those will happen without some sort of intermediary that has the credibility on both sides, possibly some country like Oman. But I disagree that the Saudi intervention has been a complete failure. Again, we're only 3 weeks into an air campaign, and Saudi Arabia has been talking about ground troops. Egypt has already committed ground troops should there be some sort of military action on the ground. And I don't think that's a bluff. So saying that this is a failure already, I don't know that it's a wise decision, Saudi Arabia's intervention in this way, but I don't think it's done in any means.
Okay, Dana, you mentioned Iran's proposed peace plan there. Let's talk a little bit about that. Iran has proposed its own plan for ending the conflict in Yemen. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has called for a ceasefire and free passage of humanitarian aid. He also called for dialogue between Yemen's warring factions and the establishment of a new broad-based government. He also said Saudi Arabia and Iran should hold talks, though he insisted it was up to the Yemenis to solve their differences. Mohammed, Dana there saying that although it does seem like a sensible plan, it lacks credibility. Do you think it's going to get much support?
No, it does have credibility. The problem is that the Saudis won't accept it. I think that the Saudis are going to pay a price in the coming weeks, and ultimately they're going to have to accept a negotiated solution where the people of Yemen have a say in all this. The Saudis in the past, they've had clashes on the border with Yemen in 2009. Back then, Ansarullah was a very small group, incomparable to them and their allies now, and the Saudis were beaten. The Egyptians during Nasser, when he was a very powerful figure, much stronger than Egypt today, which is a country facing so many internal crises and facing its own extremism, he also failed in Yemen. So I don't think it's going to be of any use for any ground troops to go into Yemen. They'll basically be defeated as well.
Can I ask you, before we get onto the possibility of ground forces, why is Iran making a proposal for a peace plan? If it says it's not involved in Yemen and it's not arming them, it's not advising them, why would it choose to put forward a peace plan? Is it worried that the Houthis will lose?
No, because the Iranians support elections in Yemen. In Syria, they did the same. When the Annan plan was put forward by Kofi Annan, it was the Iranians who supported it. And the Americans knocked it to the ground because they thought they could steamroll into Damascus. In Iraq, it's the same policy. The Iranians believe without a doubt that the Saudis are making a grave mistake here. And I think it's important to keep in mind that the real problem here is that not sectarianism, as the Saudis would like to say. It's the Wahhabi ideology. You have this ideology, whether it's Al-Qaeda or ISIL in this region. You have it in Libya, which has destroyed the country. Iran is not present in Libya. You have it in Nigeria, Boko Haram. You have it in Somalia, just recently in Kenya, the slaughter of innocent people by Al-Shabaab. They are all of these different groups, the Taliban, they all have the same background ideology. Where is that ideology coming from?
Of course, and the Houthis would be, they're equated to that, overrunning Sana'a and driving out the president. So,
in Yemen, actually, there's a huge coalition of different forces. The Grand Mufti of the Shafi'is, they oppose the intervention by the Saudi regime.
Okay.
In the south, the southern movement, they've condemned what the Saudis have done, most of the factions. So it's why not have a peace process and have elections and see what happens?
Okay, well, let's put that point to Khalid. That seems straightforward enough. Why not have peace dialogue? Why not have elections, Khalid? Why not stop the airstrikes?
First, let me use the words of two of Iranian leaders, Ali Shariati and Ali Younisi. Ali Younisi was the last one to say that it wasn't a sectarian, it was a Sasani empire that is controlling 4 Arab capitals, and Baghdad is going to be its capital. We went into Iraq.
I'm sorry, we are running out of time. And Khalid, I do need to keep you on point here.
Ali
I just want to ask you,
passed away 36 years ago.
What do you make of the Iranian peace plan, or any peace plan that calls for dialogue? If there was enough pressure calling for dialogue, would Saudi stop its airstrikes?
Well, the Security Council already put a resolution and put the conditions. They have to leave Sana'a and elsewhere and go back to Saada, and they have to leave out the heavy and middle equipments they stole, and they have to return back as a political party. If they do that, if they follow, if they obey the international community's resolution, then the airstrike will stop and the table is open for
Okay,
them.
and
But
what's
if
the
they
next stage?
insist-
Do you think Saudi will follow through with a ground offensive, as has been talked about? Egypt has also said that it would commit troops to a ground offensive if Saudi went that way. What do you think will happen?
It might go to that end, but I am hoping that the Arab tribes, the Yemeni tribes, which I belong to, by the way, who decided to do the job themselves, will do it for Yemenis, and will throw the Houthis back to Tehran and Qom, inshallah.
Okay, Mohammed, how would Iran react to a ground offensive?
Well, first of all, your guess is so utterly sectarian. The Houthis are part of Yemen, but he wants to kick them out of their own country. So he's very much like the Israelis. But the reality is that the people of Yemen
They are the agents of Iran.
Defeat a ground assault. Well, I mean, it's good
Like
for your
Hezbollah.
audience to see these views, because I think it's very useful. But obviously, the Saudi government has failed. And by killing the people of Yemen in the south and the north, they're not going to be seen as liberators, no matter how much the Americans support them. And by the way, the Israelis also support the Saudi actions in Yemen, which is very interesting. But at the end of the day, Saudi policy in this region has led to the rise of extremism. It's led to the rise of ISIL. It's led to the rise of the Nusra Front and Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, and Al-Qaeda in Yemen is now benefiting from the airstrikes as well.
Let me get the view from Washington.
No,
Let me get the view from Washington,
question.
because I want to just continue on this issue about whether there would be a ground offensive. Dana, obviously the US has backed the Saudi-led operation thus far with airstrikes. What would be the position if there was a ground offensive?
I don't know how far the United States is willing to support this. It's provided some logistical support, some intelligence support. It's assisted with aerial targeting. It's assisted by aerial refueling of Saudi fighter sorties. But in terms of a ground invasion, that might be a bridge too far for the United States to support. But I think this conversation has been really indicative of a problem in the conflict, that the way that this has become a proxy war between the Saudis and the Iranians is exacerbating the sectarian tensions here, because this is not a sectarian conflict. These are people with political grievances. It's the Houthis
not a
who
sectarian
have been
conflict, and
marginalized
that's
in the
why
north.
it's not a proxy war.
But Mohammed, that's how it's been perceived,
but we're
isn't
drawing
it?
into
Recognize that the people of Yemen have a will of their own. To call them proxies is an insult to
Then
millions of
stay
people
out
in
of
Yemen.
it.
They have a right for self-determination.
Then stay out of it.
It's not a proxy war.
Then stay out of it.
But Khaled,
the Yemeni people are in it.
Yemeni people.
It's
So this
the Yemenis
is
who are being bombed by the Saudis.
why. So Khaled, I mean, let's answer this. Why can't the Yemenis self-determine their own future? Why do the Saudis have to get involved?
Because the Iranian came first. They started 25 years ago when Badruddin al-Houthi was invited to Qom and he and his children for 10 years, and then sent back to Yemen in 2002 to start the Houthi movement with the help of Iran. Iran has been helping
it seems to me
them
that the conflict
all
in
along until
Yemen
now.
is never going to be
Al-Qaeda,
solved unless there is some
ISIL,
agreement
the Houthi
between Iran
movement.
and Saudi.
Al-Qaeda is in Iran. Their leaders are in Iran. The Abu Osama bin Laden's sons and family in Iran. Please don't talk about Al-Qaeda. They hurt us. Daesh hurt us, but they never hurt you because you sponsor them. Look at you. Everywhere you were, there is blood and death and destruction in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon.
I think we've highlighted.
in Yemen.
I think gentlemen, sadly we have come to the end of the discussion. I think we've highlighted very clearly the kind of problems and issues which are going to have to be overcome before there is any kind of settlement in Yemen. Thank you very much
God
indeed.
help the people of Yemen.
All of you for joining us and trying to shed some light on what's going on. Thank you to all my guests, Khaled Batafi, Mohammed Marandi and Dana Stuster.
Thank you.
Fascinating discussion. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Inside Story. You can get in touch with us. Go straight to our programme page at aljazeera.com. You can post your comments if you want to get involved in the discussion at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And of course, you can tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From all the team here, I'm Shuli Ghosh. Bye for now.